Good morning. Merry Christmas. It was a wonderful Christmas Eve candlelighting service if you were here. It was just amazing. And if you are visiting with us, if you're a guest, thank you so much for coming. We've had a wonderful year this year. Our theme has been, as you heard, one truth, many paths. We've been talking about that all year, the different ways of journeying in this spiritual journey. We even talked about it in the context of the journey to visit the Christ child as a metaphor for our own journey of spiritual exploration. We plan to wrap up this year with our World Peace Meditation that you heard announced. It's also known as the World Healing Day, and it takes place, I want to re-emphasize this because it's easy to get it mixed up. It takes place at noon Greenwich time on December the 31st. So that's right, you heard it correctly. It is at 4 a.m. actually. And it's darker than even the picture shows. And it's cold. It's cold and dark, but you know what? We warm up the sanctuary, and it's just wonderful. And so that's Thursday morning, December 31st, not Friday morning on the 1st of January. It's on Thursday morning. Now, I mention that because each year we have people showing up on the first of the year at 4 a.m. all by themselves in the freezing cold, and it does not contribute to world peace. They get super grumpy because the peace meditation already happened the day before. So it is on Thursday morning, and it has been described as one of the most comprehensive prayer activities in the history of our planet. It is a planetary-wide affirmation of peace, love, and forgiveness. Now, the foundation that is, we say, hosting it, on their website, it describes the purpose of this event as being to reverse the polarity of negativity in the group mind of the human race, and to usher in a new era of peace on earth. When the idea first emerged, it was announced 2 years before the first event took place. And word started to spread really quickly because I don't think anything like this had been undertaken worldwide, non-denominational, non-political. And when it first did take place in 1984, there are some estimates that more than 500 million people participated. At least we know that it took place on 7 continents in over 70 countries and in all of the states of the United States of America because people registered their participation. And Centers for Spiritual Living have always been strong supporters of this event, even when it sort of declined in popularity and fewer organizations around the world did it. We still did it. In fact, we have been hosting this World Peace Meditation ever since 1984 at 4 a.m. So at least somebody's been holding the banner bright for world peace. Yeah. Now, you're invited to join us either by physically showing up over here in the sanctuary. You can come in your PJs. It's wonderful. Bring a blankie. And come on and be over here. Or you can join us in spirit from wherever you are at Greenwich noon. Just sit up in your bed, or maybe you'll be on another coast somewhere, and you can know that you are participating in something that is recovering its popularity. Peace is in again. That's wonderful, yeah. And you're also invited to join us for our New Year's Eve Vigil, which also takes place on Thursday between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. You can just come for a moment, just drop in, or you can spend the whole 12 hours with us. It takes place right here in the sanctuary, and it will be transformed into an experience for your personal transformation and introspection. You can sit quietly. You'll hear prayers every hour. And I was thinking about our spring vigil. We have 2 vigils, one at the end of the year and one in the spring. And at the spring vigil, we unpack our portable labyrinth in the social hall. And I asked if we could do that again, but it turns out our portable labyrinth is being dry cleaned. But no worries, we're still working on that because we actually have a miniature version of the labyrinth painted on our stage. You probably can't see it from there, but we're going to see if we can move the curtains back so we can have the labyrinth available to add to the visual experience, because we've been talking about that all month. The symbolic journey to the center of your own being. And doing it with a labyrinth is unparalleled. It's unbeatable. It's a wonderful thing to do, following an ancient pattern that takes you to the center, symbolically, of your own being. We've been talking about that journey, the journey of discovery of our authentic self. We've been using the book, Your Redefining Moments by Dennis Merritt Jones, a lovely book about those moments in our lives that redefine us, or a better way to say it, they nudge us into remembering what is the truth of our being. What is it that is alive in us? Last week we were encouraged through the topic of self-inquiry to ask ourselves over and over again, who am I? So that we could get past all of the labels that we use or we gather in life to describe who we are. I'm a father, I'm a brother, I'm a mother, I'm a sibling, I'm an artist, I'm a winner, I'm a loser, I'm alone, I'm angry, I'm depressed. Not to say that they are not valid, just to bring them all out into the open, put them on the table so we can finally get past them to consider what is also simultaneously true about my life. Past these labels, in addition to them, who am I? That's the journey we've been talking about, the journey of discovering that additional truth of our being. Now, in this final chapter of the book, the author tells us about some traditions from olden days in which spiritual masters would take the time to separate themselves from the world so they could reacquaint themselves with that authentic self within. They had to retreat from the world because it's so filled up with distractions, and the dust and the grime of the journey through ordinary living would sometimes cloud their vision so that they no longer saw clearly the truth of their being. So they went on retreat to reconnect with the answer to the question, who am I again? And the author asks this week, now once you find the answer to that, who you are, you've got to ask yourself also, what's the point of knowing that if you're not going to do anything with it? I mean, once you find out, who am I in addition to all of my labels? Am I going to let that awareness, am I going to let life use me in a more beautiful way now that I know, now that I'm remembering who I am? See, once you discover the truth of your being, the question is, how much of that authentic, amazing self are you going to let come through you into your job? How much are you going to bring to life of that authentic self in your family? Into your activities when you do the normal actions of doing your work, your homework, your chores, just relating to people. Will you let the awareness of your authentic self make you even more honest? Will you let it make you even kinder than you already are? Will you let it prompt you to be more honorable than you even are? Will you let it cause you to become even more decent a human being than you already are? Turns out the spiritual masters of olden days, he tells us in the book, had the same challenges that we have, the same challenges to stay with the truth. It's very easy to forget the big picture of who we are because the distractions of life can be so consistent and persistent, and because they're persistent, they creep in, and sometimes we don't even notice it's happening. I remember once I went on a road trip to Joshua Tree the beautiful national park, surrounded by all these desert communities. And it was a dry season. And as I was driving through the communities and through the park, I didn't notice that a thin film of dust was gathering over my car, and it was slowly turning from blue to brown. Not until I accidentally bumped the windshield wiper, and it scraped through what apparently was now quite a thick film of brown, and I realized I didn't even notice that was happening. Not until I actually took the time to wash it out did my beautiful car come back to life. It's like Howard Thurman wrote about it so beautifully, so poetically, when he said, "Little by little, there crept into my life the dust and grit of the journey, details, lower level demands, all kinds of cross currents, nothing momentous, nothing overwhelming, nothing flagrant, just wear and tear." And the room goes quiet because you know what he's talking about, right? The accumulation of stuff that, if not paid attention to, over time becomes normal. So normal that I might begin to identify it as the truth. I might start to think my car is actually brown. It's not that the labels we gather in life are not true. It's just that, and there is more to us than the labels. Well, we forget the truth, and it happens to the best among us, even the spiritual masters of olden times. And so what they would do to compensate for their forgetfulness is they would make a sacred sojourn. Isn't that a wonderful word? Sojourn. They would make a sacred sojourn, which is the practice of retreating from the world to reflect and remember and reconnect with the truth of their being. So some would go into the forest to be with nature. Some would go into the desert for 40 days to fast and be focused. And still others would ascend to the top of high, high mountains so that they could literally be above the noise of the world, where they could contemplate in silence and reconnect with the truth of their being. In other words, they were giving themselves the time and the space to remember. They thought of it as a time of washing away the layers of accumulated grime of everyday life. See, it turns out that the labels of life don't peel themselves back. We have to peel them back. Now, interesting thing about this phrase, sacred sojourn, that word sojourn, it means to stay somewhere temporarily. See, it doesn't mean go away permanently. Neither does it mean escape or abandon. It means a brief visit. I remember the first time I visited Armstrong Grove. You know the beautiful Armstrong Forest there in Guerneville? Been there? Oh, it was so amazing. I visited for the first time early on in my career as a new minister at the Center for Spiritual Living. It was tough times. Things weren't going well when I got here, Attendance at the center dropped 200 people within the first 3 months, and I was getting hate mail. I think I represented something like a hostile takeover, or I don't know what it was, but it was hard, and the dust and the grime of the journey was getting to me. And I went to Armstrong Woods because nature is one of my ways of recovering. And when I got there, the peace of the place was impressive. You know what it's like. It's almost like the quiet presses down upon a person. And I thought to myself, I never want to leave here. They can't get me here. But I knew, as I'm sure you know, we eventually have to go back. So I just took 2 hours and I just sat on one of those benches on one of the paths. I just sat there. Didn't seem like too much was actually happening. I can't say that I thought any particular thought or I didn't do any particular spiritual practice. In fact, at the end of my time, I wondered if it had done any good. Funny thing is that when I got back to the office, I knew it had done good and that I was in a better frame of mind because other people noticed it. And they commented on it. You see, I think what happened in the forest was that a little bit of my inner peace came back to life in that moment. And that inner peace that came back to life, it stayed with me longer than the 2 hours that I invested in it. I got much more return for my investment than I thought was possible. And so that peace started to leak out of me in the form of tolerance and kindness and forbearance and hope and courage. The masters of olden times, the spiritual masters, they understood this. They understood that the purpose of their lives was not to withdraw from life completely and be untouched by the difficulties of the life experience. No, they knew that they had to be in the world. They knew that they had to bring what they discovered on the top of the mountain, what they encountered in the forest, what they found in their meditation, they had to bring that home. They had to bring that back to the world. They had to bring that into their families. They had to bring that into their workplaces. They had to come home and live from their authentic self. Dennis Merritt Jones, the author of the book, he says, the story of the masters ascending to the mountaintop is also our story. At the end of the day, if we are to live an authentic life in a manner that impacts the world in life-affirming ways, we know we must each make the sacred sojourn. So there it is. That's his challenge for us. He's literally saying to us, you know, you have to take time to remember. It's not going to happen by itself. And if you do, it's going to be better for everyone. When you remember the truth of your being, you remember what is alive in you. It's going to be better for everyone. Now, the ways of making a sacred sojourn are varied. Think of the climbing to the top of the mountain as a metaphor. It means basically doing whatever you and I need to do to get beyond the noise for a moment, to shake off the labels for a moment, to set aside the distractions for a moment, just long enough to do some remembering, just to do a little remembering, so that within us can come back to life. And the good news is that here at the center we have created a container for you to do that in, effortlessly, easily, right here at the center in a number of ways. At our World Peace Meditation, either physically or in spirit, just 1 hour to remember and let peace be rekindled. Or anywhere along the 12-hour vigil, our New Year's Eve vigil, to drop in and remember. And quite possibly, if we get our stage rearranged in time, you can add to that an actual journey to the center using the labyrinth experience. Oh, I like the labyrinth experience very much, because once you travel along the circuitous journey to the center, you get to the center, and after a brief visit, you have to travel back the way you came. And you might bump into other pilgrims along the way. And it's all done in silence. It's really amazing. And do you know that the labyrinth experience was how people, ordinary people in olden times who couldn't afford to make a pilgrimage to a distant land, to a holy site, it was how they completed a symbolic journey so they could have the experience of going to the center of their being without leaving their village. Oh, it's a wonderful thing. But they had to come back. And that possibly is the most important thing I read in this week's reading. We get to come back home. And what we bring with us when we come home makes all the difference. What we bring back with us can be a blessing to our world. Indeed, making the journey to the center of our being, to dip into the love, peace, truth, and beauty, or whatever it is you call it inside of you, and to bring it and birth it into the world. Oh, it's one of the ways we can make a powerful contribution to help this world be a better place for everyone. Bringing your best self back. That's what our theme for next year is all about. This global vision we have. It calls us to use our imagination to see a world in which people are living that way from their best selves. In my mind, it's easier for me to see this vision from my best self than it is from my stressed out self. Which is why I can see it is so important for me to carve out time to disengage so I can re-engage with what is true. Here is what our vision is calling us to consider. To imagine a world where all life is honored as expressions of the divine, where people live according to spiritual truth, where humanity awakens to spiritual magnificence and rediscovers personal creative power, where we live as one global family, where kinship with all life prospers, where unity and connection is emphasized and forgiveness is the norm. A world where spiritual guidance is valued and where we are called to conscious social action, where people have enough food and homes and a sense of belonging, where there is peace, harmony, and justice for all, where resources are valued, cared for, and shared, where communities are meaningfully involved in service to the world, where there is a renewed emphasis on beauty, nature, creativity, art, and aesthetics. Now, this vision for our movement is one that is being adopted all across the United States in centers for spiritual living, as well as in centers in other international territories. There is something beautiful about that momentum that reminds me of the World Peace Meditation, something starting where we are all together sitting and thinking about our best selves, bringing and birthing a world that is a better place. Our spiritual leader of our entire movement, his name is Dr. Ken Gordon. He's from Canada, and he recently put together a presentation launching this idea of what our movement is doing. So I brought it along with me to show you.
This video was recorded live at the Center for Spiritual Living in Kelowna, British Columbia. Our sincere thanks to Caesarius Productions for the assistance.
Please join me in welcoming onto the stage our very own Dr. Ken Gordon. Thank you. You may have a seat.
Good morning. We're going to start this with a world that works for everyone. That's the theme for the month. And each one of these weeks that we're doing is done by a different minister, which is even more exciting. There's just an incredible amount of creativity coming in from the field and feeding this idea in such a powerful way that I think we're going to transform the world here in the next 52 weeks. The first week, January 3rd, the bullet point structures were written by me. So this talk that is going to take place on January 3rd is going to be given by many people who pick up the various bullet points and then create and bring into being their own talk that comes from it. And when I talk about a world that works for everyone, what I'm talking about is the vision of our organization. And just briefly, what it is that we know that this vision that is being put forward of a world that works for everyone cannot be encapsulated within anyone's consciousness or idea that they have right now. But what we do know about the state of mind and the state of intelligence, the state of consciousness that each and every one of us has, is that when we lay something before us and put it out in front of us, and when we provide ourselves with the faith to know that it must become a reality, that everything that is necessary to bring it into fruition automatically happens and comes into being. So January 3rd, what we're going to do all over the world is talk about a world that works for everyone. Our second week, which will be January 10th, is going to be delivered from one of our ministers in Dayton, Ohio, by the name of Reverend C.C. Coltrane. She created the bullet points for it. And the topic for that is the world has learned all it should through suffering. And Dr. Holmes, our founder, wrote, the world is beginning to realize that it's learned all it should through suffering and pain. Surely there can be no intelligence in the universe that wishes man to be sick, suffer pain, be unhappy, and end in oblivion. This is one of our founding beliefs. We know that suffering is not something that we need to do. Now, as a collective consciousness and as a society, we've certainly manifested and brought into being a belief system which allows us to believe that. Suffering is a state of mind for humanity. We actually believe that A, we deserve it, and B, that it cleanses us and makes us better. And I will share with you that that belief system has resulted in us being defensive around suffering on a regular basis, where what we attempt to do is push it away or to avoid it in any way, shape, or form because it is one of our commonalities. And the problem with that is that we become unlike that which we were meant to be. That we actually will achieve this nirvana, which is the natural state of our being, that we will achieve that nirvana if we could only suffer a little bit more. Does this sound vaguely familiar to the way and the theme that we have in life itself, which is life is hard and then you die and then you get all the good stuff after you go to heaven? And there's rules why you can't go to heaven because you have to live a certain life in a certain way in order to be able to do it and believe a certain thing. And so on January 10th, what we will do throughout 250,000 people around the world is we will present that idea in a multitude of ways. We have over 420 churches, and I'm so excited to find out what each and every one of those ministers have to say about that particular idea. The third one, 17th, is done by Dr. Christian Sorensen from Seaside, California. And Dr. Christian laid out the bullet points for it, and his topic was, we see all people, all beings, and all life as expressions of God. Dr. Holmes wrote, suppose each one of us goes out into the unknown country and works an acre of land. There are 250 acres, and each one will take an acre of the same land. There are not 250 different kinds of creative processes in the soil. There is only one kind of creative process, common to the 250 acres. But we are people, so each one plants his plot the way that he or she likes to plant it. Then everything is different when it comes up, and people who see it say, here are 250 individual acres of land. Well, I'll tell you, there is no such thing. There are 250 individualized plots of one creativity operating through this same soil. It's up to us to choose what we plant in our lives. If you plant love, you get love. If you plant happiness, you get happiness. If you plant gratitude, you get gratitude. If you plant pain, you get pain. If you plant violence, you get violence. If you plant fear, you get fear. This is the way the universe works on January 24th. Presented by Dr. Jim Lockhart, who, as many of you know, is retired now, but used to be at Simi Valley and is very, very involved. And his topic is, this one, speaking of God itself, manifests itself in and through all of creation, but is not absorbed by its creation. And Dr. Holmes wrote here, he said, people must realize that no matter how infinite the infinite may be, it can only become to them what it can become through them. We must look at ourselves with our own eyes. If we could open up, clean house mentally, and get out of ourselves everything that ails us, I don't care what the poverty is or the misery is, everything would be allowed because the infinite cannot refuse anything. The infinite is infinite. It contains everything and all things. It contains that which might appear to be painful. It contains that which appears to be helpful. But we know that this universal intelligence, we know this thing that we call God, Allah, whatever name you choose to put on it, life, is nothing more and nothing less than the perfection. And it is up to us to choose what it is that we want, and it becomes manifest. So that is on January 24th. The final one that we do for the month of January is done by Reverend Dr. Kathy Hearn, who is from San Diego, California, and she was the previous spiritual leader for United Centers for Spiritual Living before we integrated and came together. And her quote, or her theme, is, "We see a world in which people live in alignment with their highest spiritual path." This is the highest and greatest calling that each and every one of us has to do, is to become authentic within our own being and authentic within our lives, true authenticity. Dr. Holmes wrote around this, "Whatever is true of the universe as a whole must also be true of the individual as some part of the whole. Each individual is evolved from the universe as a self-conscious, thinking, center of living spirit, and as such must, in nature and being, reproduce the universe in their own lives." This is a fantastic concept. This is how I choose to live my life, as a reflection of the higher power, as a reflection of the infinite, not a reflection of my smaller mind, which has all of the neuroses that bring into my life and my experience that which hinders, that which creates suffering, that which blocks, that which denies. Instead, to be able to live my life as that light and that love and that joy and that beauty. But the key is that is that evolution that we step into in life itself. It's the awareness that when we learn and hear something that resonates with us, that we become greater and we have a greater idea. That we begin to create greater form and different form and experience in our life when we embrace those truths which resonate with us, those things that are authentic within our own being. And when we understand and appreciate that there is only one thing happening, and that thing is God. There is only one life. That life is perfect. That life is God's life. That life is my life now. This is the presentation of what it's about.
So I invite you now to join me in breathing in. As your eyes close, if you feel comfortable, to integrate all of this in a moment of prayer. To use our imaginations to invoke the power of creativity. We ask ourselves, what would my personal life look like if it was lived at the level of joy? And understanding that I don't know how this would come to pass, nor do I know what the greatest joy might be like, I nevertheless strive to expand my acceptance by imagining my world lived at the level of joy. And I can open the aperture of my imagination a little bit and imagine all the people in my sphere of contact, my friends, my family, my co-workers, my neighbors, and ask myself the question, what would it look like for their lives if they were lived at the level of joy? And I keep remembering that I do not know how it comes to pass. I do not know what needs to move in the social or the political sphere, but I do know that it is important that I, along with other people, hold high the light of possibility, hold open the gate of love, cherish the reality of truth, and I commit to being inspired by it. And so, being refreshed from this moment of imagining, I fully expect its nourishing creativity to last with me for so much longer than the time I have invested in prayer. There is one life, I'm remembering. It is all there is, and it is my life. It is our life, and we are united through it. This is my prayer of acceptance, and I let it be so. And so it is.